Jovan Buha! Buha!
Yo, I'm Jovan Buha, Lakers beat writer for The Athletic, and welcome to episode 36 of Buha's Block. Today we have our first two-time guest on the show. Sam Amick of The Athletic is here to break down his interesting column / report. I would say it was a column report today on the Lakers, on LeBron James, Anthony Davis, setting the table for the stakes of this week. Which the Lakers have the draft coming up on Wednesday and Thursday. They have several player options for key players, including LeBron James and D'Angelo Russell on Saturday. And then free agency starts on Sunday. And this could be a wild week. And then to top things off, they just hired officially JJ Redick on Monday and had the intro press conference. So Sam, how are you doing? And thank you for being my first two-time guest.
Jovan, what's up, my friend? What an honor. So you were able to go 35 deep on guests without any repeat. That is impressive. I'm glad to see the show is going well. Like you said, I think this visit was largely prompted by stuff that we had talked about going into today and what I ended up writing. Maybe you call it a Rollum or a Caport if you want to take the two words that you chose. But yeah, I mean, interesting stuff for the Lakers that we're going to get into, and always such an interesting time of the year. You know, as a quick aside, you know, we get off the playoff path, the finals come to an end. You're kind of doing the planes, trains, and automobiles life, you know, from Boston to Dallas, and on that sort of lifestyle, work wise. And then now, as I sit in my office, it's working the phones and so many interesting things happening in the league this time of year with players figuring out what they want to do and teams trying to turn over every single rock. So a lot to get into for sure.
So your story was essentially about how the Lakers need more high-level talent and how they need it fast if they want to prevent LeBron James and Anthony Davis from growing frustrated. You also reported that as of now, the Lakers have not gotten any official indication as to what LeBron James's plans are this offseason. So again, this is setting the stakes for this week. This is a big week. The Lakers, as of Wednesday, will have access to their 3 tradable first-round picks for the first time this summer. So it is the first day that they can make a big swing. And, you know, there's been a lot of rumors over the last several months, names like Donovan Mitchell, Trae Young, DeJounte Murray, etc. So what is the most compelling part of this story to you? And what was the thing that really stood out?
I mean, I'll start by saying that, you know, as LeBron was getting closer to his free agency, I was just kind of personally surprised at the lack of information about not only what he was going to do, but, you know, I wanted to look into the question of, okay, is there a tacit understanding from the Lakers side that he is coming back, but he tends to just let, you know, free agency play out. And, you know, but there have been years in his past when certain teams knew what he was going to do. And it was just a matter of the paperwork. And then, so first step was learning that, no, that's not the case with the Lakers. They do have confidence and optimism and hope that he'll come back, but there was no behind the scenes, you know, hey, I'll see you in a little bit. It was really a wide open approach to his free agency. And then from there, the question becomes, all right, what are the factors, at least for me, what are the factors that he is weighing heading into free agency? What is causing the delay? Is it just a personal preference to handle his free agency this way, which is, again, historically something he has done? Is it more specific? You know, at first I went down the Bronny road and tried to get clarity on the idea that, was, you know, some folks close to it felt like at least a small factor was, even as a dad, like, let me see where Bronny's going to go. Not necessarily like where Bronny goes, I go, and really not that at all, but just step one, let's see how Bronny's doing, and then I'll really decide how to play this. You know, last couple of days, the intel that I'd gotten was that, no, that's not really it. That part of it, you know, I think it could be multiple things, right? But a significant part of it was, you know, that he is a master of leverage. We've always known that about LeBron. And he knows that with the Lakers, I think certainly, like I reported, you know, he looks at this roster and thinks that it needs to be better. And I think that really is at the crux of the column and the story. And the idea right now is that to see Rob Pelinka and JJ Redick paint a certain picture of the state of the Lakers. And JJ, in his defense, it's a press conference. You're answering things kind of top of mind in real time. But he was asked late in the press conference, as you were there, do you think the championship expectations are reasonable that come with this job right now? And his answer was yes, that he didn't see this roster as too far off a championship team. And, I think LeBron, but not only LeBron, but Anthony Davis, my understanding is that they seem to see it differently. Now, let me add some nuance here. It is that time of year where what you're basically kind of learning and expressing here is this, the idea that players of that caliber know that there are opportunities with other teams to get better. There's trades that could be on the table. They just want to know that the franchise is truly pushing as hard as possible to get something done, whether it's all the names, that you mentioned. You mentioned Donovan Mitchell, which looks increasingly unlikely because of how he sees the Cleveland situation, but DeJounte Murray. And to be fair, let's highlight the other part. A lot of these are clutch clients, the same agency that represents LeBron and AD. Also a bunch of very good players, Zach LaVine, Miles Bridges, all the way down the line. So to take a quick step back, Jovan, and this because you reported on this stuff for really the last couple of years, the Lakers had, I think, been hyping this period to a pretty decent degree for quite some time. Like the thing off in the distance where they would finally be able to move 3 first, finally be able to push for something of a player of real significance, and really justifying patience earlier because of this kind of pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, if you will. So admittedly, this is just my commentary. I'm a little surprised now that they've gotten there, that the messaging has shifted a bit, that it really is, like they said at the press conference, lean into player development. Austin Reaves is a guy we'll probably talk about, Rui Hachimura, trying to take their games to the next level. And again, it's just the idea that, do the organizational stakeholders and the superstar players see the roster differently? Right now, it feels like they do.
Lean into player development. 4 words LeBron James never wants to hear. Those are 4 words that LeBron has never abided by during his career. But speaking of LeBron, as we've reported at The Athletic throughout the last couple of years, he had interest in, and really public interest. He was tweeting about it. He was talking about it in post-game press conferences, interest in reuniting with Kyrie Irving multiple times over the last couple of years. Then, as I reported last season, there was several points where he had interest in the Lakers acquiring either Zach LaVine or DeJounte Murray. And you just mentioned a couple of those guys. But when you're hearing elite player and writing that, like, is elite player a third star, a third all-star? Or you also mentioned Miles Bridges, Jeremy Grant. I would classify those guys as, sub all-star, high level players, good starting level players, but not quite all-star level guys. So where's the line with elite player, and is it just a third star, quote unquote, third all-star level guy, or is it a solid upgrade or two to the starting group, particularly on the wings, where the Lakers have been, I think, a bit vulnerable over the last few years?
No, to me, it's the latter. It's not an all-star or bust proposition. Ironically, if you look at the finals, if you were LeBron, if you're AD, you could, conceivably have a takeaway there of like Kyrie Irving just showed out and had a wonderful year, helped lead the Mavs to the finals. Maybe you feel justified for the interest you had that wasn't reciprocated by the Lakers. That doesn't actually appear to be the focus. The Jeremy Grant idea, to use him as an example, I think is something that they feel would help the team a lot, would add length, would add a two-way player. You saw not only in the finals, but in the conference finals too, and this was ironically in one of JJ Redick's quotes, Dallas, Boston, Minnesota, teams like that, the length, the physicality, there is a sense that I gathered that there's just not enough of that. And really, and this is where I'll be honest with you, and this because you live it too, like reporting on this stuff gets tricky at times because these are people, these are human beings in a locker room. But there's only so much money on the payroll that a team is going to commit to. There's only so many pieces on the chessboard. And so what seems to be a major sticking point is just the idea that whether it's Austin, whether it's Rui, it's more about the idea of, okay, are you going to engage in a conversation with another team and be willing to discuss those guys to get better with them possibly leaving town? Or are you just going to recommit to this core and say that you think, Austin in particular, that his ceiling is, much higher than it even is now? And we know, I mean, it's funny. JJ said again in his presser that like he talked about two-way play and, not to pick on Austin too much, but that's something where he struggled in the past. And at times, especially when you have a 40-year-old almost LeBron on the wing, AD trying to hold things down defensively in the middle, that's a weakness of this team. So, I mean, to your question, I think it's the latter. It's a good player, and it's more so the attempt, if you will, to have both sides get on the same page about how do we see the roster, which players are truly in play, and the idea that beyond LeBron and AD, that really nobody should be untouchable.
Yeah, I think the messaging over the last few weeks has been interesting because when ESPN reported the Dan Hurley situation, they singled out Austin Reaves, Max Christie, and Rui Hachimura. Then we had our report once JJ Redick was hired, and those were three names that we reported as well. So those have been the three names that have been tied to the Lakers in the last few weeks. And then yesterday at the intro press conference for JJ Redick, those were three of the names that were mentioned again, along with now second-year player Jalen Hood-Schifino. So the Lakers have telegraphed to some extent the guys that they view as part of their young core. There was no mention of D'Angelo Russell. There was no mention of Jared Vanderbilt. And D'Angelo Russell has a player option. Jared Vanderbilt just signed an extension last season that kicks in this summer. So I thought that was interesting that those two guys were not mentioned, and that could be maybe indicating those guys are potentially on the move. But the Rui name to me was interesting because Austin, I've been hearing dating back to the 2023 trade deadline when the Lakers chose not to include him in trade talks with Brooklyn for Kyrie Irving, that the Lakers have had a high bar for including Austin Reaves in a trade. He's been a favorite of ownership. He's been a favorite of the front office, and the Lakers really value Austin Reaves. And I think he's backed that up in the playoffs. Looking at even in the Denver series this past postseason, I thought he was clearly the Lakers' third best player. I thought he was their third best player during their playoff run to the Western Conference Finals. And even defensively, I think that was a legitimate concern earlier in the season and coming off Team USA. But I thought in the second half of the year, he really stepped up and took on a lot of the tough defensive assignments, and whether it was De'Aaron Fox or Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. So like I understand the Austin backing, and like going back to last summer, Darvin Ham was talking about Austin as a future All-Star, and that was how high the Lakers were on Austin. And it was like if a team offered him $100+ million, they were going to match that contract. So like they've been all in. Like Austin is their guy. It's their discovery. And it is like they've gotten a lot of criticism through the years for not keeping some of their young core and watching these guys grow and blossom in other situations. So like I understand the territorial nature with Austin, but Rui has been an interesting one for me just because he had a really bad postseason series against the Nuggets. And at times he was the weak link out there, even more so, I think, than D'Angelo Russell. Another name that caught my eye was just Anthony Davis's involvement in all of this, because you had the report that one of the considerations for the Lakers when they ultimately decided to move on from Darvin Ham was Anthony Davis and the potential of him, potentially asking out or demanding a trade at some point, depending on how that situation went. And then, again, we have this history of LeBron and him wanting a third star, but Anthony Davis has not really been in that position of yielding his power. But the fact that the Lakers signed him to that extension, the fact that they've talked about elevating him, the fact that he was so involved in this coaching search, it feels like the Lakers are shifting more to not necessarily being AD's franchise, because I think anytime LeBron is associated, like he's always going to be the guy, but more so shifting some of that power toward AD. So what has AD's role been in all of this?
No, I mean, you laid it out really well. The short version for me is that AD, if you take the fame aspect away and everything that comes with LeBron, AD is the more influential and important member of the Lakers right now. I just think that's a fact. He's 31. Is that right? I just wrote it last night. Is he
Yeah.
31 now? Yeah.
Yeah. Turns
He's 31 years
32 in
old.
March. Yeah.
Still in contention for all the regular season awards when it comes to, elite player, all NBA caliber every year, in the running for defensive player of the year. Fantastic ball player, and a guy who the backdrop, and I want to make sure I explain this the right way. I have nobody telling me that, like, just because Anthony Davis asked out of New Orleans does not mean that now we're saying that that's what's going to happen here. But the Lakers are smart enough to know that, past his prologue, if you will, and they know that they need to keep AD happy. And that's, I think, partly why he was involved in the coaching search. And that's why I think now it's almost more worth. I mean, again, LeBron's the one with the free agency, so that means the spotlight is on him. But it's also important to pay attention to how AD sees the roster, and and the future and the vision, because these are really important years for him. So I don't know the answer to the question that you hinted to at the top of, what if we get through this week and the Lakers don't make any big moves? I can't answer that question. I just know that it will be to some degree uncomfortable. I think it's fair to report and say that if that happens, there will be a conversation, between their camp and the Lakers about why and where is this going, and how do you see it versus how do we see it. And again, it's not a 1v1. That's LeBron, AD, Rich Paul, the Lakers, Jeannie, Rob, the Bus Brothers, all the above. So a lot of voices in the room. Kurt Rambis, of course. So that I think is kind of what they're navigating. But AD is somebody who, just like LeBron, wants to win at a really high level. And I think I probably buried it in the column a little bit. One little mini update that might sound like common sense is that there has been this idea that LeBron was ready to kind of just enjoy his twilight years in Lakerland and be fine if he's winning 45 to 48 games. You know what I mean? The message that I got this week was that there's an intensity to win at a very high level, that he is playing so well that he actually can legitimately see himself playing 2 or maybe even 3 more years, and doesn't want to do that if there's not a real organizational push to be a title contender again. AD is the same. He wants to contend for a chip. These guys are now 4 years removed from the bubble title. Lots of scrutiny and kind of headlines and failed expectations, or falling short of expectations since then. You can tell they're getting antsy, they're getting hungry, and the whole question of voice and the power structure within the Lakers is one we've been monitoring all summer. The coaching search exposed a lot of it. You know what I mean? Like the Dan Hurley pursuit was largely kind of siphoned on the side, where it was a Rob and Jeannie production that they kept under wraps. They claim, and I understand this logic, that it was largely born out of the sensitivities in the UConn community, the college situation with Dan, and there was a need to keep it under wraps. But that meant that key players like LeBron, like AD, they were, I believe, caught off guard like everybody else. So that sort of decision-making structure, and the question of, whose opinions matter the most and how do decisions get made, whether it's the coach or the roster, those matter a lot.
And then last one from me is just from the Lakers side. As you mentioned earlier, there was the talk at the 2024 trade deadline of, we only had one pick available, and you can't buy a house that's not for sale, and essentially talking about the lack of sellers at the trade deadline. And that was a legitimate thing. I mean, if you look at the players that moved at the deadline, there was no stars. Really, the big trades of the season happened earlier with OG Anunoby and Pascal Siakam ending up in New York and Indiana, respectively. So, I mean, there was some legitimacy to that, to be sure. But at the same time, there was a kicking the can down the road of, we will have access to 3 first-round picks during draft week, and we will be aggressive in trying to make a move that elevates this team to a championship level. And despite them making the conference finals a year ago, I think looking at the West, like you can make a case there's as many as 12 or even 13 teams that have a legitimate shot to make the play-in tournament. And it's just a treacherous conference. It's ridiculous the amount of talent. And every team has a star, borderline like top 30 guy and depth. And a lot of teams are younger and more athletic and longer than the Lakers. So like JJ Redick could be the next Pat Riley, the next Steve Kerr, the next Eric Spoelstra, and the Lakers could still be a play-in team next season. Right. If they don't improve this roster. So from the Lakers side of things, we've heard how LeBron and AD feel about the roster and what they feel like they need to do. What do you feel like is the sense with the Lakers in terms of how they view this roster, which way they're leaning? And again, just kind of looking at the comments yesterday, it seems like they were sort of trying to temper the expectations of don't expect the big swing, don't expect the big trade. It might be a smaller move or two where we trade one of our role players, maybe attach a pick and upgrade a starting spot or upgrade a bench spot or something. But what's your read right now with the Lakers as we are a little over 24 hours away from the draft, a little over a few days away from free agency? Just at this point in the week, where do you think the Lakers are at?
I mean, the funny part about, or the tricky part about answering that question is that we are in the middle of, there's a couple points in the calendar for the NBA that are, lying season, you know what I mean? And like we are smack dab in the middle of lying season again. So the funny thing here is like, could some of this stuff be smokescreen by the Lakers? We are going to message one way, help ourselves in negotiations. And then, Sam, your column is going to look silly when we have a big time elite player coming our way in a couple of days, maybe. Now, that's not what people close to it feel, but they don't know, again, because a lot of this stuff is kept close to the vest. What it feels like right now is they have a great deal of belief in LeBron, assuming he does return, and AD, and this core, and they want to have JJ Redick, even without his head coaching experience, with his basketball mind, with his communication skills, with his reputation. And let's be, fair to JJ here. I mean, JJ's profile is fantastic. Like the guy killed the press conference, which I know doesn't matter all that much, but I do see the qualities that that compelled the Lakers to make this outside the box move. So they want JJ to be the cheat code, if you will, to the current talent beyond LeBron and AD to take guys to the next level. The second apron stuff is tricky, and this is probably a terrible kind of comp, but I'm going to try it anyway. Like a lot of teams are going through this right now where the second apron is so restrictive that they're processing in real time what the ramifications of it are for their team. And so I'm sure everybody involved understands the second apron, but it feels a little bit like, I'm a parent, right? Like when your kid is just like, but I want to go to Disneyland 10 days in a row. And you're like, okay, but you haven't seen the bills for this. Like, you don't understand how challenging that is. There's a little bit of that, like this debate for, again, a lot of teams, like, is the second apron an easy way out for owners to just tell their players no, or if you really get in the weeds and the details of it, does it make more sense for a team like the Lakers to go down the development road? Because if you hit the second apron, now all of a sudden trades are damn near impossible to pull off because you have to go dollar for dollar, which is essentially impossible. You're losing access to draft picks. There's just so many consequences that come with it that I know I'm giving you a long answer, but that I think is how the Lakers see this. They don't see, other than Donovan Mitchell, who does not appear to be available, they don't appear to see a player who is worth giving up Austin, giving up the 3 first, and being a game changer and dealing with that salary that would likely kick them over into the second apron. That is where the divide seems to be. I think where they can meet in the middle is like, if you're LeBron, if you're AD, you're at least saying, just please promise us that on these calls with these teams that you truly are pushing as hard as possible and exploring everything. And then we can talk when it comes time to make a final decision, but don't sit on your hands because the second apron scares the hell out of you. I think that would be kind of a rough version of the request, but it feels like, and we already hit on this stuff, that the Lakers, they want to elevate the program that they already have and maybe, get somebody in the draft. I mean, there's a need for a point guard, another ball handler. It was reported, today by Yahoo Sports that they have number 17 out for, guys like Jeremy Grant. So, there does appear to be some action happening in terms of exploration. We'll just kind of see how committed they are to it.
Awesome. Well, make sure you subscribe to The Athletic and make sure you read Sam's piece over there. Sam, thank you again for being my first two-time guest. You will forever hold that honor.
Yes.
And where, aside from The Athletic,
right behind me.
I know we need a golf clap. Aside from The Athletic, where can people find your work and follow you?
Oh, I'm still mainly a Twitter guy. You can always call it Twitter, at Sam_Amick, AMICK. Instagram is at SRAMICK. And then, like you mentioned, The Athletic. So I appreciate you having me on, my friend. Good stuff. Always enjoy it, and can't wait for number 3 one of these days.
Could be sooner than later, depending on what happens this week. But thank you all so much for watching and listening. I'll be back Wednesday night after the first round of the NBA draft. I will talk to you then.